All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to look to the board members to see if there's any disclosures any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. So meeting call to order. So the vice chair will be adding 2 items as added business, 15 and 16. Sorry, we're going to be moving up items 15 and 16 as the vice chair has an early departure for work outside of here. So, one sec, sorry. All right, so today's a special day. Chief Pear has an announcement, as well as we have Sergeant Andrew Goff with us here today to be presented with his Sovereign Medal Volunteer Award. So I'll turn it over to Chief Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I thought it would be important to understand some of the background in relation to this award, and you know, very pleased for Andrew. I think I always speak about the importance of being recognized by your peers, and in fact, Andrew was nominated by one of his peers for the amount of volunteer work that he does or has been doing and continues to do, and I think it's important to recognize that. I was put down as a reference, and I was very pleased to respond to the as a reference for Andrew. So the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers, an official Canadian honor. This medal recognizes the exceptional volunteer achievements of individuals from across the country or abroad in a wide range of fields. Sergeant Goff has been a member of the London Police Service since July of 2000, when he commenced his career as a cadet. In 2001, he became a cadet recruit and attended the Ontario Police College. He's been assigned to patrol operations, recruiting and training, the investigative response unit in the Criminal Investigation Division. And in November of 2015, Andrew was promoted to sergeant, where he has been assigned to patrol operations, the headquarters detention unit, and is currently on secondment as an instructor at the Ontario Police College. Sergeant Goff has engaged in volunteer activities almost from the point of his hiring with the London Police Service. His volunteer activities include being a member of the London Police Service Color Guard, where he currently holds the position as Color Guard Commander, Chair of the London Police Service 10th Anniversary Planning Committee, and various organizations in the community, including St. John's Ambulance, Elgin St. Thomas Branch, and the YMCA St. Thomas. I think it's important to recognize that on top of the incredible amount of time that Andrew volunteers, he's also a full-time police officer, husband, father, and a reservist with the Canadian military. And as a very dedicated husband and father, he's required to set priorities, adapt to a myriad of assignments, and multitask in a very challenging police environment. In the London Police Service, on behalf of all of us at London Police Service, I congratulate Sergeant Andrew Goff on being awarded the Sovereign's Medal for Volunteers. So if Andrew can come forward, and the chair, if you want to join me.
Just wanted to add on behalf of the London Police Service Board, I just wanted to congratulate Sergeant Goff. We're very proud of you, and thank you for making London proud, and keep up the great work. So I'll turn over to Vice Chair Toff for number 15.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully, Dr. Sequeira will be joining us shortly. He had a previous commitment, but he'll be dropping by, so I'll take over this portion. As you will recall from last month's meeting, we got very, very close with the sexual assault policy and passing it, but there was just a little final tweaking that we had to do through our legal counsel and some more consultations we had to do to make sure that everything was above board. We now have a final version of the policy ready to go, and we'll be voting on adopting that policy today. But perhaps if we have any final comments on that before I call the vote.
Vanessa?
I just wanted to say and to address the board and to everyone who's joining us today that the work that has been put forward by this board and in partnership and conjunction with the communities throughout London is really significant. There are no other police services boards that have a sexual assault investigation policy. So while we know that this policy is reflecting work that was well underway within the London Police Services, and the hope is that we can really reinforce, strengthen, and start to reflect the directions from the community at a governance perspective, I really have to say that it makes me really reflective at how committed people are in this city to really enhance the work that's being done. And so I just wanted to make a mention of that and honor that and just say miigwech and thank you for everyone's contributions and patience in this process.
Looking to the board for any other comments on this? I noticed what we maybe perhaps do in light of the fact that Dr. Sequeira might still be on his way is number 15, my apologies, was the independent street checks review. So maybe if you wanted to pause on this one, we'll come back to 16. Sorry. Okay, so if you want to maybe introduce number 15 item, it's just the report of the independent street checks review by Justice Michael Tulloch.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll jump quickly ahead. I just wanted to touch base, as I'm sure everyone is aware, Justice Tulloch was tasked with reviewing the regulations with respect to street checks. And he released his report on January 1st. And there was a press conferencing the Friday. The chair and I were able to attend that. And then Justice Tulloch was able to come and meet with administration and the board a week later. It's very clear to me that the report is very well researched and well thought out. And I wanted to point out in the report that London Police Services is actually mentioned. Our policy gets praise from Justice Tulloch for being well thought out. And another very important piece that Justice Tulloch mentioned when he was here was the training that the police services has already undergone and is undergoing. He specifically mentioned Officer Dwayne Price and much of the work that he's done. So I wanted the public to know how important that work is and how many members within the LPS have been actively working on issues around implicit bias and training. It's very clear that there continues to be a lot of misunderstandings around this report and the idea of street checks. And one of the questions I believe that was asked after the press conference was, are you now going to ban carding in London? So I want to take this opportunity to be very crystal clear about this. Carding and any random and arbitrary stops no longer happen. They haven't happened for some time here for various reasons, partly because the administration did some really great proactive work with community, in collaboration with the community, and then we put together this policy in place. So let me say it again. Carding in London does not happen. It's not acceptable. There's a social harm. Anything that's random and arbitrary is not only problematic legally, but there's just no place for that in this community or anywhere else. What is important and what the report addresses is that police interactions do need to occur. And any community police interactions, that's not carding. Those are acceptable. We want to encourage that. Anything that's related to suspicious activity, where you have an articulable reason to talk to somebody, obviously, that is part of the fundamental work that the police does. And that is part of what the report is saying, and that's part of what the policy that London Police Services Board passed a couple years ago says as well. These are the acceptable areas. These are the work that it's important that the police be able to do and engage in. What I will say, just as a final thought, and I'd like to pass a motion in this regard, is Justice Tulloch's report is an opportunity for us to pause, to reflect, and to just do a quick review of our policy and to see if there's any recommendations that he has in his report that we may want to incorporate in our policy. There's also some calls to action that Justice Tulloch has suggested in terms of provincial, system-wide changes that should be implemented. So I'd like to move that now that we seem to be wrapping up the work we did on the sexual assault policy, that we revisit our own policy and with respect to street checks, update it if necessary, and as well look at what kind of advocacy the London Police Services Board can do on this issue provincially.
The motion has been moved by Vice Chair Toth. Look for a seconder. Seconded by Vanessa. Any speakers? Javid?
I just wanted to speak in favor of the motion. Something that was very clear to me is that the report, the comprehensive report from Justice Tulloch, has often been distorted through individuals based on their lens and perspective. I want to share my perspective that for much of my life, I have been subject to random and arbitrary street checks in various jurisdictions, in various international locations. The effects of these random incursions is profound on individuals' identity, such to the extent that even today, having 2 doctorate degrees and being a member of this board, I still feel my heart race when I step into our headquarters. So I think that I'm very, very excited to see that we have a service that is taking this seriously and a board that takes this seriously. I also think that we all have to stop and pause and remember that this is not an us versus them issue. It's about really helping and foster our frontline officers' ability to protect our safety, but do that in the context of safe and trusting and engaged relationships with our community members. In all the different jurisdictions I've ever lived in, the most important ingredient of public safety is trust. So I see this as a phenomenal opportunity to enhance and build upon the great work under our chief's leadership that we've already embarked upon, and just wanted to share my support.
Thank you. Look for any other speakers. All right, so the motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And it carries. Thank you. So now that Dr. Javid is back, we just introduced, Vice Chair Toth introduced the board sexual assault investigation policy, but just maybe wanted to turn to you if you had any comments or questions.
I just wanted to thank everyone that's been a part of this consultation, in particular, individuals with lived experience who spoke up either directly to us or through various community organizations. I also wanted to thank our chief. A lot of what's contained and codified within the policy is representative of his leadership and change he's brought to the service over the past months to the year. So we're very, very proud of this work and hope that it can become a document that serves as a role model and a benchmark for other jurisdictions.
Great, thank you very much. Vice Chair?
I would like, once we've passed the policy, to issue a challenge to other police services board to engage in similar work that what we've done. And I think that I speak for everyone here when I say that we'd all be happy to share the process that we engaged in, who we spoke to, and so on. And so I think publicly, I'm calling all the other police services boards in Ontario out. This is your opportunity. We did this. You don't even have to reinvent the wheel anymore. This is really important, crucial work, and it's building again on some of the trust themes that Dr. Sicaro spoke about earlier. So this is an opportunity. We're available. We've engaged in this work. It's been a profound experience for us as board members as well. So I think I'd also like to reach out to the Ontario Association of Police Services Board and perhaps send them a copy of our final policy and put that on the agenda for the next annual general meeting.
Great. So I believe it has been moved by Vice Chair. Sorry, go ahead, Vanessa.
I just wanted to add, with this policy, you know, the art of policy is in its implementation. And I think we worked hard to create some very actionable, clear, and direction in terms of how this work is going to move forward. But I want to note that the way that we went about building this policy was through a community engaged approach. And that was critical because to us, that is going to reflect in the level of change that is needed to support the communities within London. Now, the art of implementation is also going to take a community engaged approach. And I just wanted to, you know, really speak to that because one of the unique aspects of this sexual assault investigation policy is that we're not simply just speaking to diverse populations, but we are calling out populations that we know are experiencing an increased risk and that they're vulnerable and that their needs are not currently being met through the processes available. And by that, I mean two-spirited LGBTQ plus populations, Indigenous populations, people experiencing trauma, mental illness. And I really think that it's by being thoughtful and deliberate and focused and saying that we are going to continue to work with those communities in particular when it comes to understanding what implementation of this policy looks like. So I just wanted to really reinforce those messages because to me, you know, as someone who has been highly involved in developing policy, you know, there's nothing worse than seeing a policy that hasn't gone anywhere. So I'm really excited about the potential, and this is only going to be possible through ongoing efforts, respect, and collaboration with those communities. So I just want to once again to bring that forward and say the work is still ongoing with this. So miigwech.
Thank you. And just look for any other members. So with that, we'll call the question. It's two pieces, the policy itself to adopt it, as well as the second part, which is the communication, which was added by the Vice Chair to the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards and that challenge and that call to action for other police services board. So it's been moved by the Vice Chair and look for a seconder, seconded by Javid. And we'll call the question. All those in favor? And it passes. So for those following at home, we're on item number 3. Apologies for going back and forth. We just have to add 2 new business items. The first one is the Gash and Dash thefts. And it's a letter from the chief to the premier and Minister Jones, as well as LPS letter regarding special events and special paid duty requests. So look for a motion to add those to the agenda. Moved by Javid, seconded by the mayor. All those in favor? And it carries, and those will be discussed. All right, so now the election of the chair and vice chair. And I think maybe I'll just give the floor to Councillor Helmer, and I guess he can ask if there's any interest. I know
just look to see from the members of the board if folks are interested in serving as chair and vice chair. Lee?
I'd like to put my name forward for chair of the London Police Service Board for 2019.
Anyone interested for vice chair?
I'll put my name in for vice chair.
Anyone else? No? If not, then I'd be happy to move that motion that Councillor Salee and Susan Toth be chair and vice chair respectively. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Carried.
So I still have a job for now. So thank you very much, and colleagues, for your confidence. So now we got to go to number 6 item, which is the subcommittee positions for 2019. So we have the Legal Governance Policy Committee, Budget and Negotiations, and Community Relations. So I'll look to members who want to continue serving or choose to serve on the Legal Governance Policy. So we'll look for members who are interested in that. Mayor Holder,
Thank you. I'm pleased to put my name forward for legal governance.
Councillor Helmer, sorry, Deputy Mayor Helmer. Any other members interested in serving on this? The Legal Governance Policy, correct? So, Vice Chair Toff? All right, so currently the motion right now would be Mayor Holder, Deputy Mayor Helmer, and Vice Chair Toff serving on the Legal Governance and Policy Committee. And we will look for someone to serve as a chair of that committee. So if one of those 3 members is interested, could they please indicate?
I'll put my name in for chair.
So Vice Chair Toff will serve, puts her name forward to serve as chair of the Legal Governance Policy Committee. So I'll take that as a motion from Mayor Holder to move Mayor Holder, Deputy.
So moved.
And Deputy Helmer and Vice Chair Toff, as well as her to serve as a chair of the Legal Governance Policy. So it's been moved by the mayor, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? It carries. Congratulations, that's your 2019 Legal Governance Policy Committee. Budget and negotiations, I will volunteer Helmer, but I look pretty interesting. So budget and negotiations, Deputy Mayor Helmer, Vanessa, any other members? I will volunteer myself for the exciting budget and negotiations team. And I look for someone to chair the budget and negotiations. So Deputy Mayor Helmer. Any other interest? Vanessa, you good? Okay. So Deputy Mayor Helmer, Councillor Salee, as well as Vanessa will serve on the Budget and Negotiations Committee with the chair being Deputy Helmer. So I'll look for a motion. Vanessa and Javid, all those in favor? And carries. And last but not least, probably one of the most important groups, Community Relations. So Javid, Vanessa, Vice Chair Toth, and we'll look for chair of that board. See Javid's hand went up quick. Any other members? All right, so Javid to serve as chair of the Community Relations, Vanessa and Vice Chair Toth, moved by Vice Chair Toth, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? All right, so not much change, I think, from 2018. The only thing that's changed is Vanessa has joined the Budget and Negotiations Committee. So great.
Thanks.
And the mayor.
Oh, and the mayor, sorry, my apologies. Sorry, Mayor. Sorry, and we voted on that, correct? All right, awesome. So number 7, minutes of the December 20th board meeting. Look for a motion. Moved by Javid, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? And it carries. Human Resources Report, Deputy Chief Longworth. Any questions or any comments from the deputy? Seeing none, good to go. Great report, keep it up. Sorry, we need to vote on that, my apologies. All those in favor? And it carries. Sorry, moved by Helmer, seconded by Vanessa.
He's funny.
Getting ahead of myself. Number 9, disposition of unclaimed monies.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So moved by the mayor, seconded by Vanessa, Susan. Did you have a question?
No, I was happy to move that.
Okay, gotcha. All those in favor? Carries. Problem-oriented policing initiatives and adequacy standards report. We'll go to Deputy Chief Williams. Did anyone have any questions for the deputy? I guess I'll ask through the chair. I noticed there's quite a few initiatives that you've done this year, the police service. Can you compare to like the past years? Have we done more just for those following a home, as well as can you speak of a lot of them are driven by, is it driven by complaints or stats or trends, just so I guess the community can have a better understanding and appreciation for why these projects come forward?
That's a good question. So this is a high-level report that more or less sets out our framework for projects and problem-oriented policing. And the actual projects and the outcomes are reported separately, and you'll see those, they come before the board, and they also appear in the media from time to time. But essentially, they come from a number of sources, from our crime analysts who identify trends, and our core unit, community-oriented response unit, and various other areas of the police service formulate solutions and investigative plans to address that. And then there's the annual events such as homecoming and St. Patrick's Day and things like that that we regularly plan for, and we report out on those as they occur.
Thank you very much. Just, Javid?
Thank you for the high-level report. My question relates to the exciting news that London is hosting the Junos this year. I know that there's been an acknowledgement that the date is the same date as St. Patrick's Day. So my question to the deputy is whether there are any concerns regarding the existing supports and resources related to two big events on the same day.
You're correct that the main Juno event, the televised portion at least, occurs on St. Patrick's Day, and there's also the week preceding that, there's many other peripheral events within the city. So we began planning for that event several months ago, and it's an operational plan that is very fluid, and it's never really complete because it's constantly amended and updated up until the day of the event. We are satisfied right now that we have sufficient resources. We adjust resources as required, pull them from different areas within the service, and we will be prepared for the Juno weekend.
Looking for any other board member discussion? Council, Deputy Mayor Helmer?
I just wanted to say, in my part of the city, the core unit is very well respected. I think I wanted to say that there's a lot of special projects here and there that are, I think, oftentimes initiated by officers, where they come forward and they say, we're seeing some problems here. We'd like to do something particular about it. And I know it's referenced in the report in kind of a vague way, but those kind of things are greatly appreciated in the community. I know that I hear from it. I hear from people when they do happen and when they're successful. And I wanted to say thank you to the officers who are working in that area. I ran into one of the sergeants who works in this area on my way to a meeting last night. We had a little chat on the side of the road, and he was wearing the toque and the balaclava. They're on the street all the time, right? And they're walking around, and they really know people on the ground. And I just wanted to say that it's much appreciated.
The Mayor Holder?
Thanks very much. In that same keeping, my first exposure to CORE was when I chaired the Rockin' New Year's Eve at Victoria Park. And for the 13 years that I was involved in it, the core unit was always there, took part in our organizational components as well, which was really critical. So we understood the role of what they would do as it related to that evening. And there's a lot of reasons why an evening like that could go a bit sideways. And I can say to you, in all those years, the core unit was not only absolutely professional, but in terms of the advice that they've given us has been really helpful in us being proactive in dealing with issues. And they worked with the private security that we'd also hired for the event as well. So I have to say, my compliments to the core unit, and my respect for them over the years has just continued to grow, and I hope you pass it on.
Vice Chair?
If it would be appropriate at any time, and I appreciate that the unit is quite busy, but I would love to invite them to a board meeting to talk a little bit about what they do. And I'd like for us to recognize that work in a public way. So if we could issue an invitation and set something up, again, recognizing they're very busy, but I would find that really valuable. And I do have to dash, but that was my thought.
Yeah, we discussed about board presentations, and that's one of the areas that we hope to bring to you, because they are problem solvers. They do so much in the community, and I think it's important for the board and even our community to understand some of the things they do. So it is on our list of many presentations, but hopefully very soon.
Perfect, thank you. So not seeing any further discussion, I just did want to also mention that you've, one initiative in particular is the B&Es, or break and enters, that we see. And I know that many councillors who are following or watching this meeting, as well as members of the community who will express their concern with theft in the neighborhoods and stuff like that. I think that's the point of folks reporting and letting us know whether you're reporting online or calling the police, and these are where these projects are coming from. So I think it's important to continue engaging with the police service on that front, and they are listening, and this is them responding to those concerns, recognizing that, of course, there's always a limited amount of resources. But without further ado, look for a mover and seconder. Moved by Vice Chair, seconded by the Mayor. All those in favor, and it carries. Number 11, quarterly report, police pursuit statistics. Look for any discussion. Seeing none, moved by Javid, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor, and it carries. Quarterly reports, complaints against police. Look for any members of the board wishing to speak on this item. Seeing none, I will notate, from the report, based on what I'm seeing here, the numbers are down. So it's indicating that, to me, that, people, there's either less complaints or that, things are changing, or there could be a number of explanations, but I'm not sure if maybe you have some comments to add. Deputy.
Yeah, I think there was a dip this, or 2018 over 17. We always look at, a minimum of 5 years to really identify any trends, but they're stable or decreasing. We don't notice any significant trends of concern, but we try to address complaints in a timely manner as soon as possible with supervisors on the front lines, and sometimes through our professional standards branch.
Great, thank you. So without seeing no further questions, look for a mover. Moved by Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Javid. All those in favor? And it carries. Revenue offsetting personnel cost report. Any discussion? Look for a mover. Moved by Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Javid. All those in favor? And it carries. Preliminary review, 2018, verbal from Deputy Chief Williams.
As you are aware, we do provide an annual report to the board. That would come in June of this year. So, but we do have some preliminary results that we're tracking, that we've looked at in relation to not only reported crime levels, but also calls for service and response times, which are fairly good indicators of what's occurring on the front lines. I can tell you that within certain crime categories, we have seen increases. Sexual assaults, for example, are up. Reports of sexual assaults are up somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% over 2017. We think that may be a result of increased reporting, but people being more comfortable coming forward. So that's not necessarily anything to raise a big alarm over. It's a good thing if more folks are coming forward, but it's something we need to track on an annual basis. Another concern is some of the property crime, specifically break and enter and thefts, are both up relatively significantly. That's often an indication of the wider social problems that may be occurring, particularly in our downtown, which is where we are seeing a lot of theft from vehicles and petty crime, which is of concern to citizens, and that's why it's important they report it. But it may be a result of what's occurring in the core area and some other areas. Frauds are another area that is increasing, and it's a difficult area to track because we know most frauds, particularly if they're done online, are not reported, because quite often there's the impression that the police can't do anything, and oftentimes we can't, particularly with some of the cybercrime that's occurring where the perpetrators are not only not in London, but not even in Canada. So it's something we look at. Weapons offenses are probably our most concerning, that are up somewhere around 20%. Firearm seizures are up significantly over 2017. Now that may partially be due to a firearm amnesty, which we ran back in, I think it was in the spring, where we encourage individuals to turn over their firearms that may be sitting in their basements or their attics, and they may not be crime guns, but they're off the street. It's not all doom and gloom. Some crime categories, like possession of stolen property and stolen autos, are either stable or dropping. Stolen vehicles were up significantly in 2016 and 17. We ran a few proactive projects in 2018, and it seems to have effectively addressed the problem for now, but you have to stay on top of those things. In terms of calls for service, our emergency calls, which are, we call them code ones, are relatively stable, and we have a fairly good response time. If you call 911, we can be there fairly quickly. Of concern is our routine calls, and those are what we call code 3 calls that are creeping up. And the board has seen some of the service complaints that have come to our attention over 2018, where we've received complaints about our call time. And that's a product of officers on the street being very busy, taking longer to service the existing calls. So when you call in a non-emergency complaint, unfortunately, it could take anywhere from 1 to 8, 10, 12 hours for us to respond sometimes. So it's a customer service issue that we try to address, but it's, you know, there's limited staffing, and it's a matter of triaging the calls and handling as many of the calls as we can through alternative means, over the telephone or online when those opportunities exist. There'll be a more formal report. We'll probably be able to break that down a bit better in the annual report, but those are sort of the preliminary what we're seeing. Okay.
Thank you, Deputy. And just for context, for members of the public and the media to follow, so because I know they'll ask, you know, where's the report, where's the details in front of them. The reason this came forward is because, you know, I asked administration, this is very fresh and brand new stats, and I thought it was helpful in light of transparency, in light of doing things a little bit differently, to, it's the beginning of the year, let the public know this is where we're at. So, you know, I hope they understand that, of course, this is not a formal report. This is what it should most likely be, but the report finalized will come in March. Which is usually when it happens, but this is, again, the board trying to do things a little bit differently, and administration working to let the public know where we're at. And, you know, so I think it's helpful, but I just wanted to set that tone so that there's no confusion in the public when the actual report comes in March. So, so I'll just look to the board for any questions at this time. Deputy Mayor Helmer?
I appreciate the information, and actually met with Deputy Chief Williams not that long ago to talk about some of the issues that we were seeing in parts of the ward, and this sounds pretty consistent with what we discussed then. The same kind of trends are being seen a bit more on a citywide basis. In terms of some of the issues around property crime, you know, some like stolen vehicles, I could see how it might lend itself towards a project-based approach. It might be a limited number of offenders who are involved in a lot of the offenses. For something like property crime, it seems to be more widespread. Lots of potential offenders, lots of instances. So is that something that lends itself to a kind of project-based approach, or what is the response when you see that kind of increase in the numbers? You know, how can you respond to some of those different categories of offenses, because they're obviously very different, the ones you highlighted?
That's a really good question. So property crime, and mainly we're talking about break-and-enters to dwellings, so people's homes, and theft from vehicles quite often. Our crime analysts have fairly sophisticated software. They can identify trends before the crime surge in a certain area is peaked. So they can identify a building trend, and we can put together projects, and we do quite often. Up near the university during Christmas or reading week when students are away, typically we see break and enters, but so we do proactive things around that time. And this year we put something together that actually had some very good effects, and we didn't see the surge that we usually see. And we do that several times throughout the year, probably half a dozen times when we see those trends. Theft from vehicles are a bit different. They exist in pockets, and we sort of know where they are. So it's a matter of increasing police visibility in certain parking lots. Commercial areas, north on Richmond Street is one area, where it's a matter of if officers, you know, have the time, then we encourage them or direct them to spend time in those areas. But theft from vehicles are almost always crimes of opportunity. And it's people who leave their doors unlocked and their purses or cell phones sitting out in plain view. So obviously we've always encouraged people not to do that, but it still happens, and that's when the thefts occur.
So I just have a question through the chair, if you'll allow me. Deputy Williams, is it possible as well, I know your service as well as city councilors and the media, as well as board members, have encouraged members of the public to report instances. So I know regularly I'm always telling constituents, well, someone went through your car, report, go online, as also the fact that it's more accessible, made it more, has that made it more being more accessibly friendly to folks? Has that made it maybe the reason why more people are reporting? And I know earlier you kind of alluded to the fact that relating to sexual assaults, I know that's been a recent conversation. The board has talked about it, the media has talked about it locally. There's been a movement in the community and across the world as well. Has that also maybe a factor of why maybe that it's attributed to maybe seeing some increases in there? And hopefully you'll remember all of that I said, because I have just a little bit more to add. It's not to necessarily say that, I think it's a reality that we recognize that we're also in the midst of an opioid crisis. And does that have any impact or factor? I know it's not to stigmatize or to say that, people who are suffering from addictions, but I think those are questions that have come from members of the public to me, because I guess some of the interactions they had during, a theft or whatever may have been people who are suffering and living with addiction. So I don't know if you're able to kind of wrap that all up in a nice answer, be helpful.
There's a few different things there. Certainly, we encourage citizens, regardless of the type of crime, to report it, because if we don't know about it, we can't do anything about it. And our analysts, if they don't have the information, they are completely unable to identify any trends. And a lot of the property crimes and the nuisance offenses, so theft from vehicles, they can be reported online. We don't need to come to your house unless there's specific evidence that requires us to be there. So it's very easy to report that online or over the phone. And when people do that, we can address it. Break and enters, again, we will typically come to your home to report it, but if you don't know about it, we can't report it or we can't investigate it. As for the crimes of opportunity, and I agree, we don't want to stigmatize anybody, but when we have a vulnerable population in our community, which we do, and we know there's an opioid crisis, then vulnerable people sometimes resort to desperate measures, and quite often nuisance offenses or complaints that we get in certain areas of the city are a result of individuals who don't have other supports. And you'll see that in the core area specifically, and as the board is well aware. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. But.
No, that was very helpful, and it does. And just to the last point, I don't know if yourself or the chief would have this answer, but I know there's regular meetings and you're on committees with the health unit and talking about some of the social impacts and concerns. I just think if you're able to give us a little bit about that, I know, because recognizing we're facing an opiate crisis, but I guess the public may be wanting to know, is our chief and administration talking to our health partners and saying what we could do to address some of the social reasons that lead to more crime, or is there something the board could do to support? I don't know the answer. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because those are questions I'm sure we'll get.
Yeah, not only myself, but several members within the police service. We sit around several tables and committees discussing a variety of issues, but specifically related to the opioid crisis, there is a working group that Dr. Mackey has, and we have regular meetings. Much of that has to deal with the opioid crisis and our response to that. Some of the other work that was recently done in the fall this past year was a core informed response, which was basically city partners. So police were part of that, bylaw was part of that, London Cares. I forget how many different departments within the city as well, where we partnered together to look at some of those issues. And it's the vulnerable population, the homeless, poverty, the drug addiction, the mental health. All of those were part of the strategies that we looked at and how we could best respond to those based on what our responsibilities were. So those things continue to happen in our community, and you know, there is no silver bullet. There's no ultimate solution that anyone's identified, but we continue to work and do the best we can to address them.
Thank you very much, and thanks for that work. Just look to the board members for any other questions. Seeing none, so look for a motion. Moved by Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by the mayor. All those in favor? And it carries. So for those just catching up now, 15 and 16 have already been passed. Number 17, which is the new business, gas and dash thefts. I'll look over to the chief if he has any comments.
I just wanted to bring to the board's attention a letter on January 11th to the Premier and MPP, or the Honourable Jones, the Minister of Community and Correctional Services, and Honourable Laurie Scott, Minister of Labour, in relation to the gas and dash, or theft of gasoline gas drive-offs. So the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police passed a resolution that called upon the province of Ontario to develop legislation or regulation which mandates the use of gasoline pumps equipped and activated with 24-hour per day prepayment technology. And this is something London Police Service has been looking at since about 2014. But in Ontario, not here in London, knock on wood, there have been unnecessary injuries and deaths of service station employees in these events where people are stealing gas from gas stations. And it's 100% preventable. And we believe this is something that can be addressed through the technology that's available. Just to give you some information here, when we began to look at this in 2014, our review determined that 66% of the calls for service for theft of gas resulted as non-criminal matter. And so that means that we could not prove intent, or the individual had returned to pay, they forgot, or for whatever reason. We just couldn't prove the intent. And we tried, we're looking at, potentially 82% of those calls did not require an officer to attend the scene. So we started doing it through other alternative reporting, telephone resource center, but it still occupies officers' time to address what we again believe is 100% preventable. From 2015 to 2018, so in 3 years, there was a 71% increase in reports of theft of gas that resulted in over 2,000 and actually over 2,100 hours of officer time to investigate these crimes. And I think as police services, we're committed to streamlining our response and processes and improving the value of policing and criminal investigation. And we believe that, again, 100% preventable, and our resources could be deployed to other areas if this matter is addressed. And other provinces, British Columbia and Alberta, for example, already have this in place through the Occupational Health and Safety Acts. And it was a letter to the government just to support the resolution from the OACP. And we hope that action will be taken sooner than later. And maybe this police service board would be interested in supporting a similar a letter to the Premier and the government in relation to supporting this resolution.
Thank you very much, Chief. And just for the members of the board, so the Chief is looking for, to see if the board is interested in supporting that. So I'll just look to the board. If there's a motion, Vanessa, question or?
So I think when I'm reflecting on the motion, it makes a lot of sense. And I understand this is in support of direction that's already been provided. One thought does come to mind, and I wondered if you could respond to it, is just about whether this would create unnecessary barriers in accessing fuel. So I'm just thinking about the requirement to prepay at all pumps and whether that would limit the availability for people who may not have access to a credit card or a debit card.
Yeah, with the system currently, debit and credit is the availability at the pump, but you can still go in and prepay with the cashier and pump your gas after paying. So there's still that option available to pay with cash.
Mayor?
Thank you. I would actually like to refer this back to a subsequent board meeting for a little further discussion. And here's why. I'm always mindful when we look to direct private enterprise initiatives in terms of what legislatively they have to do. And in this case here, look, while I want everyone to buy their gas in London, Ontario, if you buy in Michigan or somewhere else, you know that the practice that the chief has indicated is one that's extremely common. In fact, that's the standard practice. But I think this, rather than just a motion for its sake, I'm mindful that there are a lot of implications to this. Costs to gas bar owners, small independents, cost to gas station owners. Having said that, I'm exceptionally mindful of safety and very sensitive to the comments that the chief has made there. I'd like to understand what the situation is exactly here in London a little bit more fully before I'm prepared to vote on this. So I wonder if I could ask that we refer this back for a little more information so that we could deal with this more appropriately, perhaps our next board meeting.
So the mayor has moved to refer this item. Mayor, were you looking for a quick response from the chief at this time, or?
Well, actually, the chief's certainly welcome to respond, but I think before we get into that, I think that probably the protocol would be to second it if there is a seconder, and then and any comment from board members as they wish. But the chief would certainly be welcome to comment as he wishes.
So it's been moved by yourself and seconded by Javid. So I'll just look for any board members, I guess. Deputy Mayor Helmer?
So I'll support the referral because I think it makes sense to have a little bit more time with it if members want to think it over a bit longer. For myself, I'm glad that the chief has sent the letter that he has to the premier. Seems to me like I think BC moved on this a decade ago. It's been a while. And these kind of, I'm stealing $20 in gas and somebody dies because you're trying to escape, not get caught. I mean, that's just a terrible waste of life. And on top of that, you got the resource time of responding to all of this stuff. And if it can be avoided through a pretty simple policy change, I think that's the kind of a suggestion we should be making to government, free up police to do something that is really required and that can't be avoided. And so I would like to support that, but I'm happy to discuss it next meeting, and we can send something along at that point if the board supports it.
Javid?
I echo the comments made by Deputy Mayor and also the Mayor, because there are implications around our business community, small business owners, and their relationship with police services. I completely agree with the chief. This is something I think we want to support. It's common sense. It's representative of how we may be a little bit behind, but it would be helpful, for example, just as we refer to consider if there's any available statistics related to calls to LPSB specifically, whether there are any trends, again, available through existing reporting. I wouldn't expect, if I'm not expecting to create or have to do too much of a data dive, but just within what's already collected, to look to specific statistics with LPSB, if there's any way to capture the overlap between LPSB versus the OPP, because it seems to me that there may be a lot of this happening more in jurisdictions that fall along the 400 series highways. And the third piece is around what our rates are, if this is at all possible to collect or is available in terms of the 97% coverage of prepayment technology in Ontario, what that looks like relative to Southwestern Ontario, particularly London, Middlesex, just to get a better idea of what the impact might be on our business community.
Any other discussion? I think just before I go to Chief, I'll just say, I support the principle behind the idea. I guess I'll look to the mover of the motion to ask if the ministry moves ahead and decides to support what is already being requested, would you still expect the chief to still report back, or would that just be kind of note and file at that point, just so we know?
Well, thank you, Chair, through you. It would seem to me that if the province makes a decision to unilaterally do this, as the chief has suggested, and it's applicable to all jurisdictions within the province, it would be redundant for us to ask the chief to put additional work, save and accept the comment that Javid made, which is, I think it's important to understand the impact in London, Ontario, regardless. So there may well be some information. We may refine the information we want because we're not looking to give make work projects to the department. So we may just fine tune some of the information we require.
Perfect, great. Just trying to make it efficient here. So it's been moved and seconded, and before we call the question, just look to the chief if he needed to add anything. It looks like he's good to go. All those in favor? And the motion carries. So the date of the next meeting is Thursday, February 21st, 2019. And just before I adjourn, I'll look to the members of the public. You will have an opportunity to speak to the London Police Service Board shortly. What happens is the meeting is adjourned first, and then we sit where we are, and you'll have an opportunity. So don't feel as if I don't know you're here. So look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Helmer, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? And it carries. So now it's the open mic opportunity for community members, which happens immediately following the meeting. I know there was already someone who indicated they'd be wishing to speak, but anyone is welcome to speak directly to the London Police Service Board and to let us know. Oh, sorry, actually, hold on, one sec. Sorry, apologies. So just before we go to the members of the public, I did, earlier on 17, we did add an extra item, which was the LPS letter regarding special events and special paid duty requests. So I just want to look for a motion to adjourn the meeting, re-adjourn the meeting, moved by Javit, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? And it carries. So back to number 17. That was the one that was missed because it was just added recently. And I'll just turn to the chief regarding the letter that was sent out to members of the community before we get to the public engagement portion. Chief?
Sure, I think that's one of the individuals might be here to speak to this. So just to give a brief history around it, so the PwC audit was brought in the city and offered it up to various boards, commissions, and areas of the city, and the police board of the day back in 2013-14 undertook to participate in that audit. And one of the recommendations came out of that audit had to do with special events and the costing associated to those events, and you know, the police being having to assume that responsibility. In 2014, then Chief Duncan was one of the deputies. We talked, it came out in the public in relation to that, and that we may have to look at changing our process around how we provide policing to special events. And part of that is the challenges that we were starting to face back then with the number of events in the community and the impact that it was having on us to deliver policing services across the city, not just only at this event, and who should be paying for them. And so at that time, there was some communication, there was some media attention around it as well, and some concerns for some of the events that might be impacted that don't have the resources available to them. And that was readily identified back then, and it continues to be a concern for us today. We looked at, you know, the past 4 or 5 years, and we've had the numbers go up and down, but we've had, in most years, we average about 100 events that requiring police services, whether that be for security or traffic or a variety of different things. And when we looked at it, we're sometimes close to 350 officers a year that were being taken away from their duties on a regular basis to provide services at these events. And so we started looking at the impact that was having on our ability to respond to other needs in our community. And you heard today about our response times, especially in routine calls for service and our ability to police those. And we had to come to a difficult decision in relation to how we were going to do this. And I know one of the questions that was asked about me, well, how were you deciding previous to this? Well, the challenge was we really didn't have a fair and equitable process. We had 2 or 3 and sometimes a half a dozen systems that were deciding on this. And we decided the fair way, the most equitable way, is everyone go through the same process. And part of that is our special events coordinator, which is just a fancy term for someone within our traffic office that will work with the organizers, work with the city that provide these permits, and to help plan them, for one thing, and to mitigate costs, because we know that it could be expensive, and mitigate the use of on-door resources or drawing from outside of other policing duties. That doesn't mean to say that there are not going to be, you know, those officers that are available that are working that day. So our traffic office, for example, that falls under some of their responsibilities. We also have over 40 auxiliaries that donate 8,500 hours a year on average to a variety of different events in our community for absolutely no cost. And again, they're available to help offset these incidents. And the messaging that I've been trying to give around this is that it's important that when you're planning an event, and if you're thinking that there's going to be a need for policing, if there's going to be a need for traffic control, is to engage in the process early. Engage in the process early so that the officer that's going to be looking at this can look at the resource implications and work with you to mitigate that. And I'll give you an example, this past September during FOCO, where we end up having to bring in resources from outside the city to help us police a specific unsanctioned event around Western. And there was another significant event that was going on in our community to support violence against women, and the Walk a Mile that happens every year. The challenge for them is there was no officers available to do this for free that were working that day. But it's an important event that we wanted to support. So with our traffic office, they worked with them. The event went off great. As far as I'm concerned, I participated in it. We just didn't walk on the road. They helped design a route that they got the attention into the public, that people would see them. And I don't always say this, and I'll say it anyways publicly, but God bless their fire department that day, who decided to come out with a fire truck and drive along with us. Actually, they're good guys, I shouldn't say that. They drove alongside to draw further attention to it. And so the event went off. It got the messaging out there. It got the support of the community. It didn't impact resources. So the biggest message is there are events that are very large and require a large amount of police resources. And unfortunately, we've reached that point. We just can't provide them for free. We can't strip other areas of the city to provide those services. But we want to work with you to mitigate any of that. And so getting in early and working with the special events coordinator will help to minimize that.
Thank you very much, Chief. I'll just look to the board members if they have any questions for the chief directly with this. This is the one opportunity we'll have before we adjourn, as we don't have cross debate with the members of the public. So this is your opportunity. Mayor Holder?
Thank you. Do you have any sense, Chief, of the financial impact of this? Because obviously this, in addition to resources, challenges, becomes a financial question as well. Has any math been done on this?
Unfortunately, the rate varies because some of them we've brought in officers on overtime. We've pulled officers as part of their regular duties, but I only had pure numbers at that time. I don't know what, because the events too vary in hours, and we were just capturing it. What I've seen so far is number of events and number of officers. In one particular year, I think there was over 450 officers for events that year that had to be provided both on duty and as part as the hire-on piece. So it varies significantly in ballpark. I'm sure we're well over $100,000, but it really depends on the event that has been occurring.
Thank you very much. Mayor? Yep, you need a follow-up? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge of trying to assess this, again, I understand the strains on on manpower. I think the other component of it is it would be useful, notwithstanding whether it's overtime required by our regular force or supported by auxiliaries, whatever it might be. It just seems it would be helpful to make an assessment about this if we understood what the financial implication was in terms of the police budget. And I don't know how easy that would be to get it, but it would help my own reflections on it if I had some way to absolutely assess it. I mean, anecdotally, one can sense there would be savings. It isn't because it doesn't sound like to me that it's not a function of not providing a service, whatever fashion it is, and if it's needed, it's needed. Because the other side is if an organization can't afford it, and they go without that kind of support, I think that could create a different challenge as well. So all to say, I'd like to have a sense of what the financial impact would be, and that would be helpful, I think, in our deliberations.
And no offense to the mayor, and with all due respect, there really wasn't a deliberations for the board to decide. This is simply operations. So it's strikingly different in terms of asking for permission. It's an operational matter. The issue is not always about the dollars. It's the availability of officers to perform these tasks. And so, there's the officers quite often are tied up on their beats in other areas of the city where we have to strip them to come to a particular event. And some of these events are 4 or 5 and sometimes up to 6 hours. It requires an officer not to be on their beat answering calls for service. The other issue we have is then we have to call officers in on their day off or on vacation to fill these positions. So it becomes you know, multifaceted in terms of challenging to find the resources for us to be able to offer them up as well. So there are events where there are hire-ons and for the right reasons, and sometimes those don't even get filled because the officers, quite frankly, are burned out, overworked, and are not going to come in to fill them. So there are those challenges as well around the personnel. It's not just the dollars and cents that we have to be concerned with.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I understand that it's an operational decision, but I can't imagine if someone who has been involved in activities, for the many activities that I've been involved with from a community standpoint over a bunch of years, there's always lots of lead notice. And again, I'm not suggesting that isn't an impediment to other functioning. I mean, I was really pleased to hear you say that when you could work auxiliaries in, to that extent, that just makes a world of sense to me as well. But I'm not aware, and you'll know better, of any organization that I've been involved with where we've asked for support from the police that hasn't been done with a lot of notice in advance. And again, not to say that it's not a challenge in scheduling. So if the issue is scheduling, I get it. If the issue is budget and you say it isn't, I'm just trying to find the spot where it lands on where you make that decision in supporting or not. Because if this becomes a paid event, in some cases where it's not paid currently, then it isn't a function of resources, it's a function of income. So I'm just trying to get or the individuals have to do private security, I suppose, if that's deemed. I'm just trying to get my head around the direction where this is going, that's all.
Actually, that's what we're finding more often now, is that people are using private security for a lot of different events as well. So this, you know, I didn't mention dollars and cents initially. I talked about the general policing demands that we have. And again, it goes down to the availability of us to respond to calls for service when we're stripping them away from what they should be doing. There is a financial impact that goes along with that. And when it comes to various events, and you mentioned about you're not aware of any, there are a lot. And we get requests on a Wednesday for an event on a Friday. And why I talk about having the lead time is that that's when we start to look at where can we move people around to switch their schedules. So there are we call them seasonal deployments, where we're able to move officers around from different duties that will allow us to schedule them around that event so that they are available to do it as embedded costs within the organization. So there is a cost that goes with it. But it's about having the ability to do that, and we don't always get the lead time. And part of the challenge on that FOCO one is they didn't get their permit in an earlier fashion to allow for that to be planned for, and we had to scramble to help them out. So it does happen.
Dr. Javid?
I just wanted to say, I think we as a board really do hear the chief loud and clear. In our engagement with the community and with the service, we are a jurisdiction where we've seen per capita, we simply do not have the same resources as other jurisdictions. As we're a growing community, it's great that there's community events happening. It's great that there's a diversity of those events happening. But I agree with the chief. I think processes like these would benefit from standardization, planning, and making sure that there's an existing framework that the service will continue to do its best to serve the needs of the community within appropriate constraints. Also appreciating what constitutes essential services versus special events. So I agree. I think this is a general framework that makes sense to me as a board member. I agree that it's not so much our jurisdiction in terms of operations. And I would support any sort of standardization and approach that ensures that all members of the community can continue to engage with the service around their needs in a thoughtful, planned, and timely way, because at the end of the day, that's going to help make us all safer by ensuring that we've got planning around deployment and preparation in terms of risk and safety. So thank you.
Look for any other board members? All right, so motion to receive. Look for a mover or any other comments. Moved by Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by seconder, looking for a seconder. Second by the mayor. All those in favor? And it carries. All All right, so now I'll look for a motion to adjourn once again. Apologies for that. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Javid. Seconded. All those in favor? And it carries. Great. So now, Mr. Randy Warden, thank you very much for your patience, but you're a trooper, so you're used to standing in one place for no reason, but you have a reason here for sure. So the open mic is now open, so the floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Chief, Your Worship, respected board members. I am joined by Brian Harris to my left, and Brian is the District Commander for the Royal Canadian Legion. I am the recently appointed Remembrance Day chairperson for the City of London. And before I say anything, I just want to acknowledge that many of the London police officers have served in the military, including Sergeant Goff, and we thank you for your service. My background, part of the reason I was asked to take on the Remembrance Day service, is that I have chaired in the neighborhood of 20 major events for the City of London. And those events have included Canada Day, the Sesquicentennial, the National Day of Honor, the Veterans Golf Tournament, and the list goes on. And some of those events have had as many as 40,000 people attend that event in a single day. And my background has intimate knowledge of the system that the chief is proposing, and I fully support it, just for the record. The police have always been very, very collaborative and willing to work with each of those events that I've talked to, and we thank the police for how you're proceeding. Why we are here is what we're asking this board and the city to consider is to perhaps differentiate Remembrance Day from a community event. You know, I've been listening to the media since this thing first hit the air, and the Legion's being asked to be to get out there and be creative on how it might raise funds. Well, I have raised millions of dollars towards community events for this city, and I'm going to tell you, Remembrance Day is not one where you want sponsor boards over the remembrance books downstairs. You do not want banners in the background of the Remembrance Day event around the Cenotaph. You do not want me to line the Dundas Street and the parade route with food vendors and the other ways that events will try and raise funds. 100% of the Remembrance Day committee are volunteers. We all give. The majority are veterans. We do this because it's the right thing to do. When I hear the chief talk about alternate routes, respectfully, the reason Remembrance Day marches right down the middle of the street is an observance of the military having been given the freedoms of the city. Bayonets fixed, drums blazing, flags flying, and right down the middle of the street. And that's why Remembrance Day goes right down the middle of the street. And I recognize that creates some very interesting logistical problems, and willing to work with the police on how do we solve those creatively without adding a whole lot of cost to it. What I'm asking is that you not bear that cost on the committee, because if you do, we then have to turn and figure out where is that money coming from, because we do not go soliciting for sponsors, nor do we have any appetite to do so. We do this on the revenues that are raised from the Poppy Fund. If you are asking us to dip into the Poppy Fund to play the police, I'm going to tell you that money's coming right out of the creative things that the Legion does for Parkwood Hospital and for veteran programs. I'm not sure that's where the city wants to go on this or where the police are looking to go. We're not looking to bear any new costs because we try to get this done as inexpensively as possible by us all sharing our burden. We are asking respectfully that the London Police Service, the London Police Board, consider its past practice of this being a remembrance service, not a community event, and work with us in how we might present it for this year and going forward. Of the, to give you some scope of the project, and you know how many people show up for Remembrance Day, but the committee that puts that together is a steering committee with about a half a dozen people, and a community engagement group that's got about 60 people, and they represent the Legion, the military, every veteran group here in the City of London, the police, the RCMP. we are as representative as this community as you can get, and every single person that sits on that committee does so out of their own free time. They are all volunteers. So I ask that you consider not changing the policy that you are putting forward. I certainly understand the business necessity of it, but I am asking that Remembrance Day not be seen as a community event in this instance, that is seen as a remembrance service, and the sanctity of that remembrance service be maintained, and this be excluded from this policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. Just look for any members, any other members from the public wishing to speak. Please come up, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Al Gibson. I'm the chair of the board of the local London Elgin Middlesex Crime Stoppers program. Just wanted to bring the attention of the board. Police service already knows this is Crime Stoppers Month across Canada. And in respect, I'm asking for a letter of recognition to that from the Police Services Board. London Police are the largest recipient of tips that come in anonymously to our program in the two counties. We do not include St. Thomas and Elmer as they have their own program. So I'm just asking for that recognition from the Police Services Board. We have great relationships with Chief Perry, the two deputies, and all of the service staff with London Police, also Strathmore-Caradoc, the OPP, and the three police services from Chippewa, Oneida, and Muncie. We have great relationships with them, and also the RCMP. So if we could get that recognition, we will put that out on our social media. Just so you know, we had a great event last night on human trafficking. We had over 300 people to our event of a mixed audience, well received. Great questions were forwarded from the public to the two presenters. One from London Police, one from the OPP, and we thank Chief Perry for allowing David to come and speak to the crowd. Great information. It's a huge issue in our city. It's a billion-dollar industry worldwide. So we brought that forward as one of our events for Crime Stoppers Month. The other one, so you know, we also have the annual high school video contest that we put through to the two school boards. We also include Oxford County because they're within the bailiwick of the two boards in our area. And the winning team gets a new iPad each. We sponsor this every year, and it's on illegal drugs and alcohol this year. Big topics that were suggested to us by the students last year. So just wanted to bring your attention to that. We've been around for about 33 years in our area. I just gave Chief Perry our statistical analysis for 2018. There's also that report going to the chair of the Police Services Board for your perusal. Questions and comments are welcome to me from that report. And as a longtime volunteer in our city, I also want to congratulate the sergeant on his award. Very well received and well respected. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll just look for any other members of the public. All right, seeing none. Usually we don't go back and forth and cross debate, but what will happen today is the mayor indicated that he would put a communication on the next agenda related to the matter you've raised, the letter of recognition for the Crime Stoppers. So that will be at the February meeting, and that will probably most likely be moved by the mayor. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So thank you for that. And as far as, sorry, one sec. So I just wanted to say that part, and I just wanted to also thank Mr. Randy Warden for coming forward with us. Usually the board doesn't engage in back and forth, just so we can make sure that members of the public can feel as if we're not directly debating them. But your points are well heard, and you'll hear from us soon, I'm sure, as well as I'm sure from the mayor as well. So thank you very much to the members of the public, and we will see you all in February.